Hello, dear listeners. Kia ora, bro.
Kia ora, bro. Thanks, Dino. And kia ora, g'day to you. Welcome to KIWI Week on the Quarter Hour podcast. So Liam says to me, why do you get to have all the fun, Wade? How come you get to go across the ditch and talk to New Zealand radio people? I want in on that act. And I said, mate, it's a team game here in the Quarter Hour. Neither of us are better than the other. So why don't you hop on a plane and do an interview yourself? So please enjoy today's interview where Liam picks his New Zealand radio personality.
Something's just jumped out in front of us.
Just leapt out of nowhere. Don't you hate how they do that? Unbelievable.
That post I backed into when I was a kid on the farm. It was leapt out of nowhere.
I believe you. It's happened to me. So if it's happened to you, maybe it wasn't even a post. Maybe it was something else.
Yeah.
Something else maybe valuable.
Yeah, when have you reversed over something and it's lived to tell the tale?
It is The Bright Side on Rhema. You're with Andrew and Becky.
Hi and welcome to the Quarter Hour podcast. I'm Liam Renton along with Wade Kingsley, and this week we are in New Zealand. It's KIWI Week. We've heard from some talented broadcasters and are keen to see how different radio is, especially when you're working in a market that has so much choice for listeners. Auckland has about 44 radio stations from commercial, state, student and public broadcasters. They've got community, they've got ethnic frequencies that also make up the list. And Radio Rhema is one of the oldest stations in New Zealand. They went global with their brand in the 80s. In fact, a couple of stations even popped up here in Australia in the 90s, to now having 3 major radio channels across New Zealand. And the host of Rhema FM Breakfast Show joins us right now. Andrew Curtis, welcome to the Quarter Hour podcast.
Oh, it's a thrill, a privilege and an honour.
Well, welcome to KIWI Week. What's it like broadcasting in a city that has so many radio stations?
It's so weird to hear people be surprised about this because I suppose it's a frog in hot water situation. I've always just grown up with there being an abundance of radio, and it blows my mind when I go somewhere like Melbourne, that of course has the same population as New Zealand and, you know, maybe half a dozen commercial networks, if I remember rightly. So it's just as it is. I'd love to tell you there's some profound reflection, but it's just what I've always grown up with.
Are they hard to pick up? Like every millimetre on the dial, is there a brand, like a station there? Oh, hang on, and another one. Like there wouldn't be a lot of static noise, would there? Because there'd be like a station every millimetre.
You're probably right about that. I think we are very grateful for, digital radio tuners. It's probably the biggest development that we've benefited from. Because in your cars, I suppose, you go over a speed bump and you're 4 stations deep. But no, these days it is pretty heavily populated. And this is even still across some of the AM network as well, but you learn to navigate, don't you? So once you've got your presets, and you're generally fine.
You started in commercial radio. Where did you work? Give us some stations we might know.
Oh, so it was a very brief tenure, in fact, for what was called the Radio Network. I think they're the ones who go by NZME right now. So back then it was doing like traffic reports and things like that for News Talk ZB and that kind of stable of stations. I think ZM was under the same banner. But I very quickly just decided that, I can't really see what my future is in all this. And so I gave it away, and I probably had about a 15-year gap between that and then coming back to it.
So what led you to Rhema FM?
The short version is that the itch came back to do radio again. And I just started playing around with things like podcasts, more to see, is this something that I'm regularly going to keep doing? Because that's always been a bit of a tester for me, right? If it's really something that you want to keep doing, you'll have the energy to repeat it. And after doing that for a while, it was a chance meetup with the guy who's actually now the CEO of Rhema Media, Luke Weston. He and I were actually at uni together, and we did our radio majors together. So at the end of the day, it was, nepotism, I suppose, gone rampant.
Relationships, we call it, relationships.
That's right. I would need to market that better, don't I? But yeah, and just said to him, I'd just kind of been thinking about it, and we had a coffee, and, I started doing some relief announcing and, a few hours a week here or there. And after a while, I said, hey, would you come work here full time? And I suppose the rest is history.
Christian radio is just a norm in New Zealand. You've got 3 separate channels on a variety of frequencies nationwide. How's it received by the general public?
It's funny because on the one hand, you're right, we've been around for a long time. I think 1978 was when Christian radio started in New Zealand. So on the one hand, you've got plenty of people who've grown up with it, and you tell them that you work for Rhema, and they're like, oh yeah, Rhema, yeah, I've heard of Rhema before. But at the same time, we still have people who just discover the station for the first time, and we know this because, of course, they correspond and tell us now what the station means to them. So it honestly feels like parallel universes sometimes. On the one hand, a lot of people know of you, but then in terms of how familiar they are with what you broadcast, I think that's the thing that sometimes I find people are maybe stuck in the the mode of what we might have broadcast back in, say, the 90s and aren't really familiar with how the station sounds today.
Is what you do, like, would you call it niche programming? Look, are you aiming at every Kiwi, but you just play Christian rock music? How would you describe Rhema programming?
That's a great question, because there's a dimension to programming that I think is universal, right? Whether you're a Christian or otherwise, you still, your car breaks down and, you got to replace the fridge, you got to get the kids to school. And so particularly with like our breakfast program, I think, bar the music, I suppose it would really tip you off in a few of the moments where we might offer to, say, pray for our audience if something big's going on in the world. I think it's very typical to a lot of, AC kind of style stations and that sort of thing. So I think in that respect, it's very relatable. But then, of course, there's a large degree of which our audience want to get a faith perspective on a lot of things. So even if there's major news events, we want to be seen to be talking about those things and maybe wrestling with those from a classic, what would Jesus do kind of perspective. So that certainly comes through. But I like to think we try and blend the two of them really strongly together. And then in later programming throughout the day, that might get into more detail of, say, some of our longer form interviews and that sort of thing, where you'd find a stronger, deliberate faith skew, particularly that speaks to our quote-unquote target market.
For people that haven't listened, like, how does Christian radio in New Zealand differ from commercial radio? I mean, you're playing news, you got ads, you got music. I mean, the format, the structure's pretty similar.
I would say that's fair, yeah. There's not too much, I suppose, in that respect it's too different. We don't play as many ads because one of the biggest differences, of course, which might surprise many if you're not familiar, is that we're a majority listener-supported radio station. I mean, we're talking upwards of 85, 90%. And even a lot of the advertising we play is because there are businesses that actually want to find a unique way of supporting the station. And so that's one of their ways of doing so. We're still playing news on the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour and that sort of thing. But of course, the music as well. In terms of tone, I suppose, is the biggest thing. I mean, we are, of course, going to be very family friendly. So there's going to be certain topics or ways that we talk about something that maybe other stations would not. Every now and then I think about something coming up in the news. I think, that'd be a great phoner, but maybe that's not quite right for our audience today. So it is blending those two things together, but I think you'd find it maybe more accessible than people might assume if you've never really listened to Christian radio for any longer period of time.
I mean, your aim's about impacting, correct? Not financial gain.
Yeah, big time.
What do you think of the other radio stations in your market? I mean, you're in one of the biggest radio markets in the world in Auckland. What do you think about all your competition? Tell me about them.
I think it's great to see. I mean, the great thing about having this many radio stations to listen to is, of course, I mean, we're more than just one person, right? For any radio station, I'm sure there are those who just listen to one all the time. But to know that there are these news stations available, there's top 40 music. I mean, most Christian people will listen to other forms of music. This is known. So it doesn't bother me that there are other stations as well that people can listen to if they want to scratch that itch. But equally too, one of the things that people appreciate and that we hear a lot is that, dare I say, the vibe with Rhema is very different. And I suppose you'd have to listen to really know what I'm talking about, but you can probably assume that there's a air of positivity about it. But people do remark on how different they feel when they listen. And I think that's what kind of brings them back. But there's certainly certain content that you won't find on Rhema that you can get in other places. And so that helps us all sharpen what we do when you realize you're competing against all these other stations. On the one hand, we are competing. On the other hand, we're not. So you kind of do feel that tension a little bit sometimes.
What can we as Aussies learn from Kiwi radio? I mean, especially in a market where there's 40-something stations. None of us would work in a market that size. What could we learn from the Kiwis, do you reckon?
I think competition just makes your product better. I don't think you have to be threatened by it. I think you can certainly rise and fall by your ratings month to month, but when you realize that, one or two people ticking a ratings book slightly differently is going to make such a massive difference. I always try to be as intrinsically motivated as I can. So I want to do the best radio that I can. And so having people that we work alongside to listen to what we do and say how we could improve that product, then that's what I find most rewarding. I think you probably feel a sense of greater job security in Christian radio. And that's sometimes a blessing, sometimes can make things difficult because it can also, there's be a lot of inertia around the station as well. But certainly to learn that you've really got to be focusing on your craft and not just be trapped on the ratings, month to month, because otherwise you'll end up bipolar in 6 months.
I'd love to know your thoughts or what you know about Australian radio. What do you sort of learn from what's happening over here? Do you hear much about what we're doing? Have you learned anything from what we've done in the last little while?
I mean, the big thing within our world, of course, is there's a lot of other faith stations in Australia as well. And so the whole topic of mixed format is a hand grenade in these circles. How much do you just play Christian artists or, I don't know, I mean, even using the term Christian artist can be tortured a little bit to include whoever you want these days. It's you two, depending on the day of the week. But that's the one that I find most interesting. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not really too worried one way or the other. I think if people want to try that and people respond, ultimately, dare I say it, it's more of a market capitalism approach. Even if I'm speaking about Christian radio, if people are listening, then that's what they want to listen to. And so you can decide as much as you want about what they should be listening to. But if that's the kind of station that people are resonating with, then I think you kind of go with it. So that's the thing that I think I'm most aware of in New Zealand. But other than that, I've got to admit that's it's something I've got to increase my knowledge of.
What I love a lot about listening to Kiwi radio, and I tune into radio all over the world, is how important your NZ culture is to broadcasting in New Zealand. Like you just seem to embrace the Māori culture. I think we call it the Maori culture over here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you embrace it so much. Talk me through that.
It's been a really interesting development. I think it's a reflection of what we've wrestled with culturally across the entire nation for the last, 20, 30, 40 years. That our history with our Indigenous people is not exactly a glittering one, as I'm sure, many Australians can also relate to. I think we have done a good job as a country trying to wrestle with that, and it's not a smooth process. I think on a personal level, I've accepted that kind of wrestling is going to be a little uncomfortable sometimes, and there are those who sometimes feel like in the promotion of one culture, are we then saying that this other one is not good enough, and say, particularly those from a New Zealand European background, can sometimes feel a bit defensive about it. But you just kind of, I don't know, you learn to roll through it. And to me, it's what makes New Zealand culture, as you said, it's what makes us unique, even amongst other countries that have got, say, New Zealand, have got European heritage to them. To see how that started to intertwine with Māori culture has been a beautiful thing. And so it's just becoming really a part of our day-to-day. It has been amazing to see over the last, say, 20 or 30 years.
Before we let you go, what can commercial radio learn from Christian radio in New Zealand?
I think that the work environment that we have is a beautiful thing. I honestly wrestle with this a little bit because on the one hand, I can see how commercial realities can really push people to deliver, but it can also create an environment where people are at one another and people will undercut one another or do whatever they can to kind of get ahead. You don't get that within Christian radio. However, of course, our attention can go the other way because it is such a safe environment. I do find, again, you have to be very intrinsically motivated. If you want to do anything, you probably can. Nobody's going to stand in your way. But at the same time, finding the resources and navigating that can be a little bit more challenging. So, I mean, the short version is to say creating a safe environment is something that all of us want, and operating on high cortisol for a long time is bad for many people. We've all seen those who've been in media for a long time crack under the pressure of it. So I'm always very sad to see that. I'd love to see people feel more safe and secure in their roles. Equally, it's a challenging time economically, and so some of these choices are made from on high, and we just kind of have to learn to roll with it. So being able to support one another as a radio community, I think, is something we do well within Christian media. And maybe if we saw more of that across radio as a whole, that'd be great.
We're loving this week. We're calling it Kiwi Week, and we're chatting to a different Kiwi personality every day. We've learnt from you. Andrew Curtis is the Brekkie host on Rhema FM, broadcast nationally around New Zealand, but out of Auckland, where there's over 40 radio stations. Thank you for joining us on the Quarter Hour Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for the chance to chat, and I'd love to learn more about Aussie radio too. So once you've got your Aussie special, send them all my way and I'll catch myself up.